Why are Vuwani residents against merging parts of their area with Malamulele? What are the latest developments in Vuwani? Is the Inter-Ministerial Task Team likely to bring peace and stability to Vuwani? Which avenues can be explored other than burning schools and destroying property? What time is it? It's question time. Welcome to Question Time. My name is Municipality. 11 of the 21 people arrested in connection with public violence in Limpopo's Vuwani area appeared in court on Monday. The objection by Vuwani residents against the Municipal Demarcation Board's decision to merge parts of their area with Malamulele to form a new municipality has triggered weeks of chaos and malicious damage to property. 24 schools are reported to have been torched in the process, with thousands of learners left in a state of despair and helplessness. Meanwhile, an Inter-Ministerial Task Team has been dispatched to meet tribal leaders and local communities in order to help restore law and order. The banning of buildings and destruction of property as a way of voicing grievances by some communities has become a cause for concern. By the way, we had extended an invitation to the Municipal Demarcation Board, who had accepted the invitation and then decided not to come, citing reasons such as they have been threatened and the person who was supposed to come here has received threats and therefore they are pulling out. So we had invited the Demarcation Board, but they decided not to come. We are live and we'll be taking your views. The numbers to dial is 089-110-4210. Our Twitter handle at QuestionTime24. My guest, Father Smangaliso Mkhatshwa, is chairman, Moral Regeneration Movement, and he's joining us from our Pretoria studios. And on the line we have Ndadem Sibudi Mangena, who is an author, former ZAPO president, and former Minister of Science and Technology in the Republic. We hope to be talking to him also. Gentlemen, let me welcome you to Question Time. Ndademangena, if you can hear me, you wrote an article in today's Sowetan where you were deploring basically the behavior of people protesting but using systems such as not fighting, but burning down schools and all that. So perhaps just give us a little bit breakdown of what that article entails. Okay, Ndademangena is not on the line as yet, told, but we have Mike Maringa. Mike is our reporter in the area and has been there since this whole saga started. Mike, welcome to Question Time. What's the latest?
Hi, Paul. Let's indicate that this afternoon, the Minister of State Security, David Mashoko, went to Mashawu and Vuwani with a view or trying to clean the area. They did manage to clean the roads at Vuwani.
Yes.
And at Mashawu, around 3 o'clock, they were supposed to go to Vuwani to make this lockup to at least try to make a way forward and to ensure that schooling resumes next week. But let me indicate that between Vuwani and Mashawu, there's a place called Seyebwom.
Yes.
That is where the trouble was today. They started burning tires, roads were blockaded with stones and tree branches. They are still adamant that they don't want to meet with government officials. What they want is for the king and the president to sit and come up with a solution. So that is the view that came from the locals today, that they cannot engage with anyone from the department except that which their king has called for, to say that he wants to meet with the president. He wants a political intervention from the highest office. So the meeting went ahead, but I must also indicate that there were very few people from Vuwani, those who are affected. It was mainly ANC members from the area, but the people on the ground were not part of that meeting. But the situation as it is now, it's a bit calm, but the likelihood is that they might start the things again because there are a series of meetings that have been lined up for the whole week.
But Mike, it would appear though that tribalism is being used as a reason for some behaviors. But you've been there on the ground. What are the underlying factors that we are not told here?
Look, there are things that are not reported. You are correct. There is an undertone of tribalism because you've got people from Bungeni who are next to who are saying we won't be allowing Venda-speaking people to come into our area because they are banning our schools. This is not happening for the first time. When Malamulele was banning, you had the same situation where people from Chikonele did the same. They blockaded the road to say we can't allow these Tonga people from Malamulele to come to ban our schools. So what we are seeing now is a repetition of what we have seen at Malamulele when they were demanding their own municipality. But also we must also indicate that there are not clear reasons that which are advanced as to why the Vuwani people cannot join Malamulele to form a new municipality, except that they were not consulted. Because the question raised was that even if the consultation was not proper, why can't you wait for this new municipality to be established to see if it can render services? Those are some of the questions that were not answered. So we don't know as to how it will end, but there is a ton of tribalism. This supposed to be finding it difficult to live together as of now, but that was not the case back then.
Mike, finally though, but when you move around those areas, I mean from Njakanjaka, Kachabani, Hamatsira, and as you go, Kajim Jones and all those areas, those people have been living there for many, many years. They attended the same schools. Whether you are Venda speaking or Tonga speaking, they were attending the same school. Somebody like Chief Vuwani Matsira, he presides over a community of both Venda speaking and Tonga speaking people. How are people relating under these circumstances?
Look, the villages, especially those that you have mentioned towards Matsila, they seem to be about this whole issue. They seem to be going ahead, living together. But it will look like there are certain areas where the people to say that you cannot reside amongst Tongas, you can't be led by them. And the same sentiments were echoed at Malamulele when it started to say Venda people are not servicing us. So this is what brought about this tribal connotation that we're talking about, to say it started because of services. It had to do with who is in charge of the municipality, not to say that these people hate each other. At some point we need to be out and frank to say that at the core of what we're seeing now of this tribalism, it's a power struggle, it's money that is at play.
Mike Maringa, thank you very much for your contribution. That was our reporter, Mike Maringa, talking to us from Vuwani. Dademkacho, it would appear that there's a serious problem here. If people cannot correlate and use this undertones which Mike has been referring to, then social cohesion is far, far away from us.
Paul, thank you for the opportunity. When you go and see a doctor to be treated, before the doctor treats you, he or she will first want to find out what exactly are the root causes of the pain, of the ailment, before they prescribe any medication. Now, in this particular instance, I think you're quite right to say that there are a number of factors. It's not just one reason why there is conflict in that area. There is an element of tribalism, but I think that is probably, it might be overstated, because as the last speaker has just pointed out, people have lived together, have coexisted for many, many years, until apartheid came along with his separate development policy and say, you see, you are Tsonga, you are Venda, you are Spedi-speaking people. You people actually are different nations. And I think that then threw in the seed of the feeling of separation, of different people feeling that they are now different from one another, which even led to the erection of separate villages, schools, hospitals, church sites, administrations, and so on and so on. And then come 1999, we have a new constitution. That constitution makes provision for one system of government, even if there are 3 spheres and so on. But it also, what is interesting, makes provision for traditional leadership, which to some extent keeps that separation, which is artificial, keeps that alive to a certain extent. Now, let me also just point out, Mpo, that because of these separate Bandustans, although now they've all been done away with and so on, there is still appetite for political power and influence. And that could be one of the reasons why there is this conflict. Because when you have a political position, you have access to resources, to financial and material benefits. Those are some of the reasons, some of the causes of the conflict.
Hold it there. We're going to take a quick break. The number to dial is 089-110-4210. And when we return, we'll be talking to Ntate Msibudi Mangena as well. Please don't go away.
Technology isn't all scary. There's also fun stuff like gaming.
Lots of women do play games, whether it's on their phones or their tablets.
Then there are Africans who are using new tools to make other people's lives much easier.
We typed the whole CV on a small, QWERTY Nokia phone.
For all these and other technology and social media news, join me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC News.
Welcome back. You are still watching Question Time. My guest in the day is Mangaliso Mkachwa, his father Mkachwa. He's the chairperson of the Moral Regeneration Movement. And on the line now, we are joined by Ntate Msibudi Mangena, who's an author and academic, former ZAPO leader, and former Minister of Science and Technology. Ntate Mangena, today in the Sowetan, you are saying basically, no matter the reason, you cannot have a good reason enough to burn down schools?
Absolutely not, especially because the schools belong to our children. And the burning of our schools really distressed me to no end. Because firstly, as adults, we ought to be protecting our children, not using them as cannon fodder when we have struggles that we need to wage as adults. Secondly, whatever we are fighting about has got nothing to do with the schools. It is something to do with municipalities, etc. It has nothing to do with the schools and the education of our children. Thirdly, we are destroying the future of our children. We fought very hard to attain freedom. Now we should have economic freedom and economic democracy. And we can only reach that stage or make a meaningful attempt if we give our children education and skills so that they can operate effectively in the economy of the country.
Well, you a politician, and politicians moving around the country. As Minister of Science and Technology, you went to Vuwani some years back to open a science lab. And you were saying, well, you don't know, but you hope that it wasn't burnt down. What would it mean if it was burnt down?
Oh, I would be devastated. Unfortunately, I was at the University of Venda this afternoon receiving an honorary doctorate. And people I worked with during those days in establishing the science center and operating it assured me that the community protected the science center and that it is fine and it is working as it has always done. And that's really wonderful news, except that children who are supposed to use that science center are now without schools, and their books and records, so on, have been burned down. And this is really mindless. It's absolutely mindless. And we should condemn this unreservedly and tell whoever wants to play around with the future of our children to stop.
But Ntate Mangena, these people are led. They have leaders.
Yes, if there is whoever encourages people, and if a leader encourages people to ban schools, does not deserve that label. That person is not a leader. Unfortunately, I hear that leaders in that area, real leaders, traditional leaders as well as other leaders in the community, are condemning this. While they support the struggles of the community and their protests, they do not support the banning of schools. And that is wonderful to hear. But I wish they had had the opportunity, the chance, and the presence of mind to stop people who moved around at night banning schools. 20 schools, 24 I think, that at the last count. 24 schools burned down. It's a devastation. And I don't think the children there will recover in a long time to come. And I was saying at the university today that the irony cannot escape us that just as we are graduating, some students and some of us are getting honorary doctorates, our children just nearby are being denied an opportunity to get an education, which will mean that they will probably never graduate, or their chances are reduced by this mayhem.
Father Mkhatshwa, what I read in Ntate Mangena's article also was you being the older generation, obviously, of activists in this country. Not even in 1976, during the June 16 uprisings, were schools targeted.
Parents, if there was any threat to any school, or if there was no school in the area, parents would be the first ones to take up knobkerries and together with their children demand schools, defend schools, ensure that education remained stable. Could I also then add to the beautiful analysis that Dr. Mangena has just given, that 800 million rand, I'm told for now, down the drain, which is going to be required in order to rebuild the schools. But for me, it's more than just the damage to physical infrastructure. It's the damage, the trauma to the children themselves. I see some of them even carrying pangas. What does this violence actually do to them, as they grow up and so on? There will be talk about catch-up programs. I don't really believe, I'm sure Mangena will agree with this in education, is that whilst that exercise is useful, but education is not just an event, it's a process. And if you interrupt that, you are actually going to find it very difficult to completely, if you like, then catch up with the process of education, not just preparing for examinations. And therefore you need mediation, not only from by government and traditional leaders, from different stakeholders in the community, because sometimes in the mediation process it might be better that people that are not part of government to actually actively participate, because they can be regarded as neutral.
Okay, hold it there. John, you're calling us from Limpopo. Welcome.
Yes, Mbo.
Yes.
I want to talk to you about what you've got on at this moment. I listened to your program, and one of the previous speakers said that this is a problem that comes from the previous regime, and I wish to disagree with him, because from the earliest days it had always been tribalism between the African nations in South Africa. It had always been. But the current problem that we are experiencing I think, stems from our own government as it is now. Because there are two things that are happening.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing is that the government does not talk to the people. And you will see where all these problems are. The problems come up, the people are irritated, they're frustrated, and they've got good reason for that as well. Because the government goes around, makes promises and these promises are never fulfilled. And then when the communities get aggravated, nobody comes to talk to them. Nobody comes to listen to what they are saying. And if they do come, they tell them lies. Now, I'm involved in a big project at this stage here in Limpopo.
Yes.
And I see the things that are happening. You know, for instance, they promise the people drinking water. So what did the government go and do? They drill holes, they put in pumps, they put motors on it, but there's no electrical supply because the supply is 5 kilometers from there.
Okay.
And there's nobody that is going to provide the electricity. The community has been expecting to get the water. Now what do? They get a hole with a pump in it.
Okay, Johan, thank you. Let me cut you short then. Mangena, is government to blame really when things get to this extent?
Well, blame or not, I know that there are many instances where the government is not responsive, and as your last caller was saying, there are promises that are made and they are not kept. And we are going into an election mode now. I think more and more promises will be made which will not be kept. But that is no excuse to ban schools. It is absolutely, it has got nothing to do with that. And we should not even use that as a reason for explaining the banning of schools by communities. That is unconscionable. And it's unacceptable.
Father Mkajo?
That I believe that, yes, the question of service delivery does come into it. But I don't really believe that what the people are doing now is the best way to go about enhancing service delivery and so on. To me, this is indicative perhaps of maybe insufficient trust relationships between, or some, not all, people on the ground and maybe people who are administrative, who are in government and so on. And therefore that needs to be strengthened so that when the two sides speak to one another, there should be an element of trust and confidence. And I am totally convinced myself that, as Dr. Mangena quite points out, there is no earthly, rational reason or explanation or justification, particularly for schools, because we're destroying the future of the country, the future of those young people. And I realize that sometimes some of these people don't value or understand the importance, the centrality of good quality education for the development in any other country. Just on a lighter note, maybe not so light because we can learn something. At the height of the civil rights struggle in the United States of America, especially when the Black Panthers and others took over, there was also this saying, burn baby, because they were so angry and they probably felt that they were not really being taken to, and that it was only when they burned something that the American government probably responded, which is a false assumption. And to some extent, this also is an element where people feel unless you destroy something, you get nothing. But as Mangena quite really, whatever you destroy, not the future of young children, not the schools.
Dr. Mangena, your final thoughts. You spent a lot of time in Zimbabwe. Was anything of this sort happening there?
Absolutely not. And Zimbabweans are very clued up when it comes to education. And my children went to school there, and I can tell you that they hanker after what their experiences were there. They are full of praises for what happened there. And I don't think even today, with the difficulties they have, the problems they have, I don't think they will do something like this.
Tatemangana, Father Mkachwa, let me thank you very much for your time. But before we go, let me just go through some of our tweets. Lhasa Mullo says, hashtag Vuwani, I am 100% supporting them. If you act, ANC doesn't listen to you. Look at Mahupong, Zibidiela, no water, clinics, roads, etc. Okay. And Oskam Dimeri says, community leaders, including government, have failed or ignored to extinguish social issues at early stage. Those are our tweets. But thank you very much. That was question time for today. A big thank you to my guests and to you for watching the show. You have yourself a wonderful time. Goodbye.